So, what does the outer layer of a rhinoceros horn have in common with the microscopic threads of a stomach worm and a 1905 eyeball transplant?
It sounds like a bizarre riddle, doesn't it?
It really does. But the answer is actually hiding in plain sight on the back of your shampoo bottle. So, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Let's unpack this.
Yeah, I love this topic because it connects so many weird historical dots.
Exactly. So, think about the last time you opened up a giant, brand new Lego set. You dump all those pieces onto the table, and at first it just looks like chaos, just hundreds of tiny, random plastic shapes.
Right, complete overload.
But then you realize there's a system. Every brick is designed to snap perfectly into another brick to build something highly specific. And medical terminology operates exactly like that giant Lego set.
It really does. I mean, it looks like an overwhelming jumble of letters at first glance,
Mhm.
but beneath the surface, it's this incredibly precise modular engineering system designed for universal communication.
And our mission today for this deep dive is to sort through a very specific pile of those medical Lego blocks. We're going to decode the secret language of the human body's armor.
Which is such a cool way to put it.
Right. I'm talking about the skin's accessory structures, so your nails, your hair, and your hard tissue. We've got a really fascinating stack of notes here covering three ancient Greek roots. That's Onycho, Tricho, and Kerato.
And, that might sound incredibly niche to some people, but these three roots govern a massive portion of the medical field. And honestly, the consumer products you use every single day.
Totally. If you've ever looked at a medical chart or tried to read a skincare ingredient list or just stared at the back of a fancy shampoo bottle and felt completely lost, well, this deep dive is your personal decoder ring.
They're going to clear up the confusion.
Yes, the goal here is to get you thoroughly informed, quickly, without drowning in all that information overload. But to do that, we actually have to look at the designers of the system first.
The architects, so to speak.
Right. And when I was going through the source material, I was shocked to discover these quote-unquote modern medical prefixes aren't modern lab inventions at all. Hippocrates was using the exact roots back in 400 BCE.
Yeah, it's wild. And then Galen formalized a lot of that language in the 2nd century. For over a millennium, his writings were basically the absolute backbone of Western medicine.
Wow.
But the catch is that back then, words like onycho for nail, tricho for hair, and kerato for horn, they weren't medical terminology yet.
They were just words.
Exactly. They're just ordinary descriptive Greek words used in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
This shift into that modular Lego system you mentioned, that didn't happen until much later.
Born out of a pretty profound crisis, right?
Oh, absolutely. A massive crisis in medical communication.
Yeah, the 1800s. Looking through the historical notes, the medical landscape in the 19th century sounded like an absolute nightmare for patient safety.
Oh, it was a mess.
Yeah.
By the 1800s, anatomists in Germany, France, Britain, and Italy, they were all working completely independently.
Which means no standard rules.
None. They had accumulated tens of thousands of competing names for just a few thousand body parts. Every regional medical school had its own distinct naming habits. Often they just named body parts after whoever discovered them.
So a doctor in Berlin and a doctor in Edinburgh could be looking at the exact same bone or the exact same skin condition and have completely different names for it.
Precisely. That meant trying to read a surgical journal from another country could lead to just catastrophic misinterpretations.
The medical community must have realized how dangerous that fragmentation was. I mean, international collaboration would be basically impossible.
It was. And that led to a monumental event in 1895, the Bosselnomina Anatomica, or BNA.
The big cleanup.
Right. A committee of anatomists sat down to systematically clean up the entire human body. Their mandate was to pick exactly one Greco-Latin root per concept and enforce it internationally.
It makes me think of the tech industry recently. For years, every single electronic device had a different charging cable. You had a drawer full of completely incompatible wires, and you could never charge your phone at a friend's house.
The dreaded cable drawer. Yes.
And then finally, everyone just agreed on the universal USB-C charger. The 1895 BNA standardization was basically the medical equivalent of agreeing on a universal charging cable.
That is a perfect analogy. The 1895 committee established the standardized building pattern we still use today. You take the root, which tells you the wearer, the body part.
Right.
Then you add a combining vowel, which is usually an O, simply to make it flow off the tongue. And finally, you snap on a suffix, which tells you like an inflammation, a disease, or a surgery.
And suddenly, clinicians across the globe could plug into the exact same anatomical language?
Exactly. And our three roots for today on Anki, Trito, and Kerato, they survived that 1895 standardization perfectly intact.
Because they were already so solid.
Yeah, they were already precise single-concept Greek words with no serious rivals, so they were selected for their clarity. They haven't needed to be revised since.
Okay, so if we take this 1895 standardized language and apply it to the human body, I guess the most visible place to start is the ends of our fingers. Let's look at onycho, derived from the Greek word onyx, meaning nail.
Perfect place to
Right away, we can put our Lego bricks together, take onycho, add myco, which means fungus, and add the suffix ophosis, which means an abnormal condition.
onychomycosis.
Exactly, an abnormal fungal condition of the nail.
Or, more commonly, a fungal nail infection.
Mm.
And this actually affects roughly 1 in 10 adults globally.
1 in 10, wow.
Yeah, and that incidence rate climbs significantly in the 60-plus demographic, largely because nail growth slows down and circulation to our extremities drops as we get older. It weakens the body's natural defense mechanism.
And our sources emphasize that onychomycosis is not just a cosmetic issue. It's not just, a discolored toenail you feel self-conscious about in sandals, especially for patients managing diabetes.
That's a really crucial point. Diabetic patients often experience peripheral neuropathy, which is a loss of sensation, alongside reduced blood flow in their feet.
Right, so they might not even feel something going wrong.
Exactly. So when a fungal infection takes hold, the nail plate physically distorts and thickens. And that thickened nail acts like a mechanical wedge.
Ouch.
It literally lifts away from the nail bed, breaking the delicate skin seal that normally keeps bacteria out.
So it basically creates a microscopic entry point.
Yes, the fungal infection is often just the first domino to fall. It opens the door for secondary bacterial infection.
Yes.
And because the patient has reduced sensation, they might not feel the infection starting.
And the poor circulation makes it worse.
Right, because they have poor circulation, their body can't efficiently send white blood cells down there to fight it off. This chain of events frequently leads to severe diabetic foot ulcers.
Unpacking that mechanism really totally dismantles a huge misconception. We tend to think of nails, and hair for that matter, as just dead material.
All the time.
A lot of people wonder how a piece of dead material can have a dynamic biological condition.
Well, the visible part of the nail plate and the hair shaft itself, those are composed of dead keratinized cells. But the structures hiding under the skin that produce them are highly active, metabolically complex living tissue systems.
Right, they're doing a lot of work down there.
Constantly. The nail matrix beneath your cuticle or the dermal papilla at the base of your hair follicle, they're constantly dividing and growing. Pathologies like onychomycosis attack the living, functioning tissue, even if the end product you touch is totally inert.
A quick trap I noticed in the research for anyone studying this, though, medical students often get tripped up because there's a Latin doublet for onycho, which is unguo.
Oh yes, the doublets.
Yeah, you'll see words like unwicular. It means the exact same thing, just derived from Latin instead of Greek.
That dual Greek and Latin naming is a lingering side effect of history that even the 1895 B&A committee couldn't entirely eliminate. They tried, but some terms are just too stubborn.
Something else from the ancient world that honestly blew my mind was the gemstone onyx. I always assumed the medical root onycho was named after the rock.
Most people do.
But the ancient Greeks actually thought the banded, translucent coloring of the onyx stone looked exactly like a human fingernail. So they named the rock after the body part.
Isn't that wild? Ancient anatomists were constantly looking for patterns and resemblances in nature to make sense of the world.
It's all connected.
It really is. And that instinct for pattern matching connects directly to how they approached our next root, troshu, derived from the Greek thrix, meaning hair.
All right, let's snap some more bricks together. Tricho plus tilo, which means to pull, plus metromania, meaning an obsessive impulse.
Trichotillomania, compulsive hair pulling.
Right. And you might assume a root meaning hair would strictly belong to dermatology, but trichotillomania is officially recognized in the DSM-5.
The Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual.
Exactly. It's classified under obsessive-compulsive and related disorders. Even though the tissue being physically damaged is the hair, the pathology, the actual root cause of the disease, lives entirely in the brain's impulse control circuitry.
It's a striking example of how a quote-unquote dermatology word can point straight to psychiatry.
It really shows how interconnected the body is.
And history gives us another incredible example of how a hair condition spills over into broader societal issues. Consider hypertrichosis. Hyper meaning excessive, trichopha for hair, ochidosis for condition. So excessive, widespread hair growth over the body.
Yeah, the case that really stood out in the notes for this is Petrus Gonsalves. He was born in Tenerife around 1537. He had congenital generalized hypertrichosis.
A really famous historical case.
And instead of receiving any sort of medical understanding, he was basically brought to the French royal court under King Henry II. He was given a formal education, he married, he had children who actually inherited the condition, but society never allowed them to just live their normal lives.
No, they were exhibited as court curiosities for decades. Their portraits are still referenced today in medical history. It really highlights a tragic historical pattern where a purely genetic dermatological condition is turned into a public spectacle rather than being treated as a clinical reality.
It's heartbreaking, and clinically, the sources point out how important it is to contrast hypertrichosis, that widespread systemic genetic condition, with a term that sounds almost identical but operates completely differently: trichiasis.
Right, trichiasis is a purely mechanical issue. It occurs when the eyelashes grow inward. Instead of sweeping debris away from the eye like they're supposed to, the stiff hairs physically rub against the cornea.
Like sandpaper scraping across a camera lens every time you blink.
Exactly.
So one is a systemic genetic condition, and the other is a positional localized problem that physically damages the eye. Very different clinical realities, even though they share the exact same tricho root.
You always have to look at the mechanism of the disease, not just the root word, to really understand what the patient is experiencing.
Okay, here is where I have to push back a little, though.
Oh, let's hear it.
As I was going through the sources, I found the parasitic worm Trichinella. This is the stomach worm that causes trichinosis, historically tied to undercooked pork. It caused so many outbreaks in the U.S. that it actually led to the creation of modern meat inspection standards.
Yep, a very important worm in public health history.
But if tricho means hair, why on earth is a stomach worm named with the hair root? It doesn't affect human hair at all.
Ah, you've stumbled into the visual naming trap.
The visual trap.
Yes. So when scientists first isolated the larvae of the trichinella worm and looked at it under a microscope, they saw these incredibly thin, coiled, thread-like structures. To them, those microscopic structures looked exactly like tiny hairs.
Oh, I see.
They used the tricho root to describe the physical appearance of the worm itself, completely detached from the symptoms of the disease it causes.
So they just named it based on what it looked like on the slide.
Exactly, just a quirky visual trap.
Okay, but if a harmless naming mistake about a stomach worm is just a quirky visual trap, what happens when a naming mistake actually dictates whether you go to an eye surgeon or a skin doctor?
That is a much bigger problem.
Right. And that brings us to our third root, kerato, which is just a total linguistic rebel.
It is the absolute definition of a pedagogical fault line for students. Kerato comes from the Greek keras, meaning horn or hard tissue, but today it has two entirely live, completely non-overlapping clinical meanings, and it depends entirely on which medical specialty is using it.
It's wild. It's as if a word completely changes its definition just by walking from one floor of a hospital to another.
That's a great way to picture it.
Let's start on the dermatology floor. Down here, kerato means keratin or hardened skin tissue. We have hyperkeratosis, which is an excessive buildup of hardened tissue. Calluses, corns, and certain warts fall into this category.
Right. And more critically, we have actinic keratosis. These are the rough, scaly, sun-damaged patches that form on the face, ears, or the backs of the hands after years of cumulative UV exposure.
The sources highlight why understanding this specific term is a massive public health priority. The UV radiation physically damages the DNA inside the skin cells, causing them to multiply abnormally and build that scaly tissue. So actinic keratosis is precancerous.
Extremely important to catch. If left untreated, the DNA damage can progress, and those lesions can turn into squamous cell carcinoma, which is a serious form of skin cancer.
So catching it early is key.
Catching actinic keratosis early and understanding that keratosis refers to a dangerous lesion of hardened skin is a primary skin cancer prevention strategy.
But if you take the elevator up to the ophthalmology floor, keratosis suddenly means something entirely different. Up here, it refers exclusively to the cornea, the clear dome at the very front of the eye.
A totally different structure.
Right. So keratitis isn't an inflamed callus, it's a dangerous inflammation of the cornea.
And keratosis is a condition where the normally round cornea thins and begins to bulge outward like a cone, severely distorting vision.
And the sources mention they treat keratoconus today with UV light and riboflavin cross-linking. What does that actually mean for the patient?
Think of it like applying a liquid structural scaffolding to a sagging bridge.
Oh, okay.
The riboflavin drops saturate the cornea, and then a specific wavelength of UV light is applied. The light triggers a chemical reaction that creates new bonds or cross-links between the collagen fibers inside the eye. It basically instantly hardens the structure so the cornea stops bulging.
It fortifies the tissue.
Exactly.
And speaking of manipulating the tissue of the eye, we really have to talk about keratoplasty, the surgical repair or transplant of the cornea. Our notes detail a massive historical milestone here.
Oh, December 7th, 1905.
Yes. An ophthalmologist named Edward Zerm is working in Olomouc in what is now the Czech Republic. He has a patient, Alois Glogar, whose cornea was severely burned and blinded by a chemical accident with lime.
And Zerm does something completely unprecedented for the era. He takes donor corneal tissue from an 11-year-old boy who had unfortunately lost an eye to an entirely separate injury. And he carefully transplants that clear tissue into Glogar's burned eye.
It worked. Glogar actually regained functional vision in 1905. This predates almost every other successful solid tissue transplant in medical history. Edward Zerm essentially founded modern transplant surgery using the cornea.
It's an extraordinary achievement. It proved solid human tissue could be grafted from one person to another.
It really is amazing.
But this dual meaning of kerato presents a real challenge. How do clinicians and patients avoid dangerous mix-ups when the same four letters can mean eyeball in one sentence and callus in the next?
Right, you'd think there'd be constant confusion. But if a patient hears Kerat something, they basically have to look at the neighboring Lego bricks.
The content.
Exactly. If the word is built alongside roots like conjunctivo or iro, or used in the context of vision, it signals the cornea branch. If it's built alongside dermo or cutaneo, it's the hardened skin tissue branch. The context of the surrounding word parts gives you the answer.
But the ultimate irony of kerato is something that was only discovered once microscopes became powerful enough to prove the ancient Greeks completely wrong about the eye.
Oh, this blew my mind. The cornea, the very structure that gave us keratitis and keratoplasty, is not made of keratin.
Not even a little bit. Histologically speaking, the cornea is classified as non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium.
Okay, we definitely need a translation for that jargon. What does non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium actually look like?
Sure, so squamous means flat and scale-like. Think of perfectly smooth microscopic floor tiles.
Okay, floor tiles.
Stratified means those tiles are stacked in multiple layers. And non-keratinized means they don't contain the tough, opaque protein keratin. Because they lack that opaque protein, and because those flat tiles are stacked in a perfectly regular geometric pattern, light passes straight through them. It essentially forms a clear biological window.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, if our corneas were made of keratin, like our nails or our calluses, they would be opaque. We wouldn't be able to see through our own eyes.
Exactly.
The ancient Greeks just named it kerato because when they examined the eye macroscopically, the cornea felt tough and curved, like a thin slice of animal horn.
They made a brilliant observation with the naked eye, but they just lacked the microscopic tools to see the cellular composition.
I have to express some outrage on behalf of anyone trying to learn this system, though. If modern histology proved the cornea isn't made of keratin, why didn't that 1895 B&A committee just rename it? Why leave us with this confusing double meaning?
I know, it seems frustrating. But medical terminology often preserves history over histological accuracy. By the time the microscope revealed the truth about the cornea's cellular structure, the terms keratitis and keratoplasty were already deeply entrenched in decades of medical literature and surgical textbooks.
Too big to fail.
Basically. Trying to uproot those terms globally would have caused way more dangerous confusion than just leaving them be. The language of medicine is a living fossil record of how our understanding of the body has evolved.
A living fossil record. That's a great phrase. And it directly mirrors an actual evolutionary connection the sources highlight regarding keratin itself. When we talk about human fingernails, human hair, or the hyperkeratosis of a callus, we're talking about an incredibly ancient, evolutionarily conserved protein scaffold.
Oh, absolutely. Vertebrates have repurposed this exact same tough, protective dead cell structure again and again over millions of years.
It's nature's favorite building material.
It is. At the molecular level, the protein building your fingernail is a close biological cousin to the outer layer of a rhinoceros horn, the heavy hooves of grazing animals, the sharp claws of predators, and even the outer structure of bird feathers.
It's just incredible to think about. We started this deep dive by dumping out a giant box of 1895 standardized medical Lego bricks. And we saw how Onich, the nail, leads us not just to common fungal infections, but into the mechanical chain reactions of diabetic foot care, and even the ancient visual pattern matching of gemstones.
Yeah, and we saw how Tricho, the hair, can drag a dermatology term straight into a psychiatric manual with trichotillomania, and how the trichinella worm proves that visual naming can set a trap for the unwary.
And then we navigated the Great Divide of Kerat, a route that lives a total double life between the eye clinic and the dermatology ward, carrying the legacy of a 1905 transplant miracle and a microscopic irony that the B&A committee just decided to leave untouched.
So the next time you're at the salon and you see a keratin smoothing treatment on the menu, or you hear someone talking about an onyx stone ring, or you see a public health ad reminding you to wear sunscreen to prevent precancerous spots, you now possess the blueprint.
You know the ancient Greek anatomy hiding right there in plain sight. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. But before you go, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
A little something extra.
Right. If our bodies still possess the ancient genetic blueprints to synthesize this indestructible keratin protein, the exact same biological material that evolution uses to build massive rhino horns, why did human evolution dial that machinery back to just yield tiny, fragile fingernails?
That's a fascinating question.
As we begin to engineer new medical treatments and manipulate our own DNA, could we one day figure out how to flip that ancient genetic switch back on to build organic armor? Keep questioning the words around you.